Emily's hand trembled as she set down a mug of coffee, the rich aroma mingling with the sizzle of bacon on the diner's griddle. The morning rush at Marge's diner was in full swing. Orders called out, dishes clattering, a low hum of conversation filling the air. Usually, Emily found comfort in the routine bustle. But not today. Today her skin prickled with a sense of dread she couldn't shake. Through the wide front window she saw him, Brett. He was striding across the parking lot, headed straight for the diner's door. Emily's stomach lurched, a flash of cold fear cutting through her. He wasn't supposed to come here, not after last time. Not after she'd told him it was over. And certainly not after the manager had warned him to stay away. The bell above the door jingled frantically as Brett shoved it open with far more force than necessary. Conversation stilled. A few customers looked up from their plates. Emily forced herself to breathe. Maybe he'd just sit down like a normal customer. Maybe he wouldn't make a scene. "Emily!" Brett called out, spotting her at the counter. His voice was too loud, already slurring. It was barely 9 a.m., and she could hear the alcohol in his tone. He approached the counter with a swagger, shoulders hunched aggressively, the sour smell of last night's whiskey wafted off him. Heat flooded Emily's cheeks as every set of eyes in the diner turned toward them. She mustered a tight, polite smile. "Brett, you shouldn't be here," she said quietly, leaning over the counter in hopes of containing the conversation. "I'm working, please." He ignored her hushed tone, leaning in. "Came to see my girl." "That a crime?" he drawled, voice carrying. "I'm not your girl," Emily replied, voice low but firm. Her heart was thudding against her ribs. She could feel the weight of curious stares from nearby tables. This was exactly the situation she'd dreaded, her private nightmare spilling into her workplace for everyone to witness. Brett's expression darkened instantly. "Don't start with that," he growled. His hand shot out and latched onto her forearm across the counter. Emily sucked in a breath as pain jolted up to her shoulder. "You've been dodging my calls. Think you can just cut me off? Make me look like a fool?" Out of the corner of her eye, Emily saw Charlie, the diner's graying manager, straighten up from the register. He looked worried, one hand already reaching for the phone. A couple of regulars shifted uneasily in their seats. The air felt charged, everyone bracing for Brett's temper. "Brett, let go of me," Emily whispered urgently. She tugged, but his grip only tightened like a vice. The edge of the counter bit into her hips as he yanked her halfway over it. Plates rattled, and a half-filled coffee cup toppled to the floor, shattering. A child at a booth gasped in fright. "Hurting you?" Brett sneered, eyes blazing as he twisted her arm just enough to make her wince. "You don't know what hurt is, Em. Not yet." The implied threat hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Emily's pulse skyrocketed. She saw truly now the wild, unhinged look in his eyes. He was beyond reasoning. Charlie hurried forward, hands raised placatingly. "Sir, you need to let her go," he said, voice calm but edged. "This isn't the place for—" "Back off!" Brett snarled without even looking at the older man. In a flash, he released Emily's arm only to round on Charlie, shoving him hard in the chest. The 60-year-old manager stumbled back into a table. Utensils and napkin dispensers clattered to the floor. Murmurs of alarm rippled through the diner. Emily stumbled free, immediately stepping between Brett and Charlie before things could escalate further. Her arm throbbed where his fingers had dug into her, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside. "Brett, stop it!" she pleaded, voice shaking despite her resolve to stay calm. "You're causing a scene." Brett's attention swung back to her, his face twisted with humiliation and rage. "You think I care about a scene?" he spat. "Maybe I should show all these people what a tease you are. Playing the sweet little waitress, acting like you're too good for me now." "Hey." A new voice cut through Brett's rant, a low, cool drawl from the back of the diner. "That's enough." Emily's breath caught. She knew that voice. It belonged to the quiet man in the corner booth. Luca, a regular who came in a few times a week, always polite, always inconspicuous. She hadn't even realized he was here this morning amid the chaos. Luca Romano rose from his seat, folding a newspaper with calm precision before setting it aside. He adjusted the cuff of his immaculate charcoal suit and began walking toward the counter. The diner fell into an even deeper hush, There was something in Luca's measured stride, in the dark intensity of his gaze fixed on Brett, that commanded attention. Brett bristled, not used to being challenged. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped, eyes narrowing at the well-dressed stranger approaching. "This ain't your business. Walk away." Luca came to a stop a few paces from them. He was maybe in his mid-30s, tall and composed, with neatly combed jet-black hair. When he spoke, his tone remained almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "The lady asked you to leave. You should do as she says." A few customers murmured in agreement. Emboldened by Luca's intervention, old Jim, the retired army vet who practically lived at the diner, stood up as well, glaring at Brett. Emily's heart fluttered nervously. The last thing she wanted was a brawl, but seeing others stand up for her filled her with a mix of relief and fear. Brett's eyes flicked around and realized he was outnumbered in sentiment, if not in sheer muscle. He let out a derisive laugh, but it sounded shaky. "This isn't over, Em," he hissed, pointing a finger inches from her face. "You and me, we're gonna talk later." With a final hateful glare at Luca, who hadn't moved, but somehow still exuded menace, Brett backed away. The bell jangled sharply as he slammed out of the diner. The silence held for a beat. Emily stood there, chest heaving with pent-up terror, staring at the swinging door. He was gone, for now, as the chatter of concerned patrons slowly resumed. Luca stepped closer to her. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. His dark eyes swept over her in assessment, lingering on the red marks already blooming on her arm. Emily swallowed, nodding numbly. Thank you," she managed. Embarrassment flooded her now that Brett was no longer filling her vision. She could feel everyone's gaze still on her. The poor waitress with the crazy ex. Tears of humiliation pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I'm sorry you had to—" "You have nothing to apologize for," Luca interrupted gently. He reached out, then paused, not wanting to overstep. Eventually, he settled on straightening the apron that had been pulled askew in the scuffle. It was such a simple, almost intimate gesture that Emily found herself momentarily speechless. Charlie approached, rubbing his shoulder with a wince. "Emily, you okay, kid?" "I'm fine," she lied softly. Her arm throbbed and her nerves were fried, but physically she'd survive. "Charlie, I'm so sorry." He held up a hand. "None of that. Why don't you take a break? Go splash some water on your face." Emily hesitated. The breakfast rush still needed tending, and she hated the idea of leaving her coworkers in the weeds. But Charlie's fatherly, stern expression booked no argument. "All right," she whispered. As she started toward the back hallway, Luca spoke up, just loud enough for her to hear. "If you need anything, I'll be around." She glanced back and found him watching her steadily. There was concern in his eyes, and anger on her behalf. A weak smile tugged at her lips. She nodded in thanks and hurried to the restroom. Behind the locked door, Emily gripped the sink and let out a shuddering breath. The girl in the mirror looked small and shaken, her auburn hair coming loose from its ponytail, green eyes shiny with unshed tears. Bruises were already surfacing on her fair skin where Brett had grabbed her. Shame and fury warred inside her. She had hoped, prayed, Brett would just leave her alone after their last fight weeks ago. Instead, he'd violated the one sanctuary she had left. Her workplace. Her slice of normal life. She ran cold water and dabbed it on her face. Gradually, her racing heart slowed. The adrenaline ebbed, replaced by a dull ache of worry. What would Brett do now? He was embarrassed and angry. Never a good combination. The restraining order she'd filed clearly meant nothing to him. The police, well, by the time they arrived, if someone had even called them, Brett would be long gone. A light knock at the restroom door made her jump. "Emily, it's me," came Charlie's voice. She opened up, forcing a smile for her boss's sake. "I'm all right, Charlie. Really." He frowned kindly. "You don't have to be. I've seen a lot in my years. Know what a scared woman looks like? You don't deserve this." The sympathy nearly undid her. Emily bit her lip hard. "I'll be fine," she insisted. "I can finish the shift." Charlie studied her, then sighed. "All right, but if you feel faint or anything, you go rest. Understood?" She nodded. The truth was, she needed the hours. Rent was due next week, and her mom's medical bills weren't getting any smaller. A missed shift was a luxury she couldn't afford. Understood. They returned to the dining area together. To her relief, things had mostly calmed. A few customers gave her supportive nods as she passed, and one kind older woman patted Emily's hand and whispered, "You stay safe, honey," when paying her bill. Luca had settled back in his booth, his newspaper open again as if nothing had happened. Yet Emily noticed he hadn't touched his coffee. It sat probably cold now, his attention subtly on her instead. Each time the front door swung open with a new patron, Luca's gaze flickered sharply to it, ensuring it wasn't Brett returning for round 2. The thought that this near stranger cared enough to keep watch warmed and unsettled her at once. She didn't even know Luca's full name, not really. Some customers called him Mr. Romano in hushed tones. She assumed he was a businessman, maybe with an office nearby. All she knew was that he always tipped in crisp $100 bills and had an aura of quiet authority, and that people, even burly ex-soldiers like old Jim, gave him a respectful berth. An hour passed. The breakfast rush petered out. Emily's arm hurt from where Brett had yanked it, but it was nothing she couldn't push through. She'd just refilled Luca's fresh cup of coffee, on the house this time, when her cell phone buzzed in the pocket of her apron. She frowned. It was a text from her mother. "Mom, can you come home, sweetie? I need you." Emily's brow furrowed. Her mom never texted during her work shift unless it was urgent. Immediately, her mind conjured worst-case scenarios: a medical episode, a fall, something broken, besides Emily's pride today. "I'll be there soon, Mom." She quickly thumbed back. She untied her apron and approached Charlie, phone in hand. "Charlie, I'm sorry, but my mom." He waved her off kindly. "Go. Family first. Hope everything's okay." "Thank you," Emily breathed. She gathered her purse, wincing as she slung it over her sore arm. As she headed for the door, her eyes involuntarily flicked to Luca's booth. He was already watching her, concern etched on his handsome features. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly as she passed. She mustered a tight smile. "Just a family thing. I have to leave a little early." Luca's jaw tightened a fraction, but he inclined his head. "Be safe. And Emily, if you need help, any help at all, you have my number." She realized in the chaos he had slipped his business card onto the counter earlier. It was now tucked in her apron pocket. Nodding, she whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't nearly adequate to cover what he'd done, but Luca seemed to understand. He gave her one last searching look, then let her go. Outside, the day had turned gray and humid, a storm brewing by the feel of it. Emily hurried the 5 blocks to the small apartment she shared with her mother, anxiety mounting with each step. Her mom's health had been fragile lately, complications from a heart condition and years of stress. Emily picked up an extra waitressing job on weekends, and even trained part-time as a certified nursing assistant just to manage the medical costs. The thought of something happening to her mother because she wasn't there in time gnawed at her. She was so preoccupied that she didn't notice the figure lurking beside the stairwell until a rough hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Panic detonated through Emily's body. Brett. Of course he hadn't gone far. She struggled, kicking back, but he was too strong. He dragged her into the narrow alley beside her apartment building, slamming her against the brick wall. Her phone and purse fell in the dirt. Emily's vision blurred with pain and fear. "You think you can make a fool of me?" Brett snarled, forearm pinning her across the collarbone. His eyes were wild, sweat beading on his forehead. "Got your new boyfriend protecting you at work, huh? That it? You spread your legs for some rich guy and suddenly you're too good for me?" Rage flared through her terror. "Shut up! That's not—" she gasped, shoving at him. He backhanded her, a sharp crack that split her lip. "Don't you tell me to shut up!" he roared. "You're mine, Emily." "No one walks away from me." Dazed, Emily tasted blood. In a flash of clarity, she knew. Talking him down wasn't going to work. Not this time. She had to get away. She opened her mouth and screamed, "Help!" Brett instantly clamped a hand around her throat and squeezed. Her scream cut off in a choked wheeze. Spots danced in her vision. Desperately, she scratched at his arm, kicked at his shins. He barely flinched. "You really think some paper restraining order will stop me? Think that fancy suit bastard at the diner scares me?" Brett leaned in, eyes glinting with something like pleasure at her helplessness. "No, baby, if I can't have you, no one will." In a surge of adrenaline, Emily's groping hand closed around a half-buried glass bottle near the alley wall. She swung it wildly. The bottle shattered against the side of Brett's head. He yelled in pain and staggered back, releasing her. Emily sucked in air, gasping. "Don't hesitate," she told herself. "Run." She bolted toward the open end of the alley, but Brett was quicker than a drunk ought to be. He grabbed her hair, yanking her backwards. Emily screamed as she fell hard to the ground. Brett loomed over her, fury and a trickle of blood down his temple making him look almost demonic. "You stupid bitch," he snarled. He lashed out with his boot, kicking her brutally in the side as she tried to scramble away on hands and knees. Pain exploded in her ribs. Emily sobbed, collapsing onto her back. Brett's face twisted with a realization. She had truly tried to fight him, embarrassed him. A terrifying calm settled over his features. He dropped to one knee beside her. "You want hurt?" he panted, breath reeking of booze and rage. "Fine, how's this?" His hands shot out and seized her right arm. Before she could process what he meant to do, he wrenched it with all his strength. Crack, white-hot pain. Emily's scream was so raw and primal it hardly sounded human. She felt the snap, felt her bones give way under his brutality. Agony blazed from her shoulder to her fingertips. Brett let go. Emily cradled her arm to her chest instinctively, curling around it on the grimy ground. It hung at an unnatural angle, already swelling. Oh God, she moaned. Shock made everything hazy. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. She dimly became aware of Brett, breathing heavily above her. He stared at what he'd done, perhaps surprised at himself. Then sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard her scream, or the commotion. Brett cursed, stumbling back. "This isn't over," he spat, voice high and panicked. Emily lay on the ground, tears streaming, vision blackening at the edges from the pain. She watched through swimming eyes as he staggered off down the alley and disappeared, his parting promise echoing cruelly. Not by a long shot. Rain began to patter, cool droplets on her fevered skin. Emily closed her eyes, clutching her broken arm. Every heartbeat sent a new wave of white-hot agony through her. "I need help." The thought cut through the shock. Her phone. Where was her phone? She forced herself to roll to her left side, biting back a scream as her arm jostled. There, her purse, contents spilled out. And amid them, her flip phone. The screen cracked but faintly glowing. Emily crawled over, cradling her useless right arm against her belly. With trembling left-hand fingers, she flipped it open. Who to call? 911? But Brett might come back, if he even saw her on the phone, or if he heard sirens and blamed her. Another spike of fear. In her haze, one name surfaced. Luca. She had his card. She didn't even know if he could help, but he'd told her to call if she ever needed anything. And right now, she needed someone, anyone, and she needed them fast. Her vision blurred with tears of pain as she scrolled to the number he'd scribbled on the back of his card and hit call. It rang only once. Then, "Emily?" Luca's voice, sharp with concern. A sob escaped her, equal parts relief and agony. "He broke my arm," she managed to whisper. Those were the first words that tumbled out. "Brett, he broke my arm. She couldn't continue, her teeth chattering as shock began to set in. There was the briefest, deadliest silence on the line. Then Luca's voice came low and tightly controlled. "Where are you?" My apartment. Allie," she gasped. Dark spots swam in her vision. She fought to stay conscious. "He's gone now, I think. I'm on my way," Luca interrupted, urgency underlying his calm tone. 10 minutes. Stay with me, Emily. Keep talking." Hearing that steady voice helped tether her to reality. She gulped shallow breaths, curling against the alley wall as thunder rumbled overhead. In halting whimpers, she told him everything. How Brett had been lying in wait. How he hurt her. Luca listened, murmuring encouragement and fury in equal measure. "Don't move any more than you have to," he instructed. "Help is coming. I'm coming." Blue and red lights flickered at the alley's mouth, resolving into a police cruiser. 2 officers cautiously approached, having followed the earlier 911 call for a disturbance. Emily stiffened. What if they took too long asking questions and she lost Luca's call? But Luca had heard the sirens too. "The police are there?" he asked tersely. Yes," she whispered. "Good. Let them help you first. I'll be there soon." Something in his tone made it clear that soon was not a gentle promise, but an order to the universe. The officers found her curled and shivering with the phone clutched in her hand. One gently knelt. "Ma'am, we're getting an ambulance. Just hang tight." The other radioed in an assault and suspect description, though Emily only croaked out Brett's name and a vague description before pain overwhelmed her again. She vaguely remembered being loaded into an ambulance. She wouldn't let go of her phone. The paramedic had to pry it gently from her hand to get her vitals. At some point, Luca must have been told which hospital they were taking her to, because when the ambulance doors opened at the ER, he was there. Luca appeared out of the storm, suit soaked from rain, eyes blazing with quiet wrath. Emily was on a stretcher, disoriented from pain meds, but when she saw him, fresh tears fell. Somehow, seeing that familiar, calm face made all the events finally crash down on her. She was safe now, safe enough to cry. "I'm here," Luca murmured, immediately moving to her side and clasping her uninjured hand. His own hands trembled ever so slightly, and she realized he had been afraid too, afraid for her. The hours in the hospital blurred together. X-rays confirmed a mid-shaft fracture of her right ulna and hairline fracture of the radius, both forearm bones broken by Brett's brutality. They set her arm in a splint, then a proper cast, all while Luca stayed within arm's reach. He must have called her mother at some point, because Marie arrived in a taxi, frantic and weepy, throwing her arms around Emily as soon as she was allowed in. "My baby," she cried, smoothing Emily's disheveled hair. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Emily hushed her, though her own voice quavered. "It's not your fault, Mom. It's not." Her mother's guilt was palpable. She'd texted Emily to come home, unwittingly drawing her into danger. At this, Luca gently interjected, "Marie, you did nothing wrong. The blame lies with the man who did this." His tone turned grim, "and he will answer for it." There was such certainty in his voice that even Marie blinked in surprise. Emily could only squeeze his hand in silent gratitude. By evening, the ER discharged Emily with a heavy fiberglass cast from wrist to above elbow, a sling, and a bottle of painkillers. Luca had quietly taken charge of every document and prescription, efficiently arranging follow-up appointments with an orthopedic specialist as if he did this sort of thing routinely. It made Emily wonder exactly what kind of life he led that a late-night medical crisis didn't ruffle him. He insisted on driving them home, in a sleek black car driven by a stone-faced chauffeur that had appeared out of nowhere. Marie, exhausted, agreed without protest. Emily, cocooned in the plush back seat between her mother and Luca, finally allowed herself to lean into him. It wasn't just the physical shock, it was the mental collapse after holding herself together for so long. Luca's arm came around her shoulders, steady and protective. "Close your eyes," he murmured. "Try to rest." Emily nodded, tears stinging her eyes at his gentleness. As city lights streamed by outside, she felt his fingers brush lightly through her hair. She didn't know why this virtual stranger cared so much, but in that moment she was endlessly grateful he did. Half asleep against his shoulder, she heard Luca speaking in a low voice. On the phone, perhaps. She caught snippets. "Find him. No. Alive. I don't care what it takes." And later, "Safe house ready. Press charges quietly handled." The words swirled in her drugged mind. She wanted to ask what he meant, but sleep tugged hard. She drifted, secure in the circle of his arm. For the first time in as long as she could recall, Emily felt truly safe. Luca had her. He wouldn't let anything happen to her or her mom tonight. When she next opened her eyes, she found herself in an unfamiliar bedroom. Soft lamplight glowed on cream-colored walls and tasteful art. The bed beneath her was king-sized and plush, and she was tucked under a thick duvet. Panic flared for a split second at not knowing where she was, until she saw Luca dozing in an armchair by the door, and remembered he had brought them to his home. He'd claimed it was for security. His place had a doorman and private security detail, whereas their apartment had only a flimsy deadbolt. And too tired and in too much pain to argue, Emily and her mother had accepted his hospitality for the night. She must have fallen asleep the moment her head hit the pillow, judging by the inky darkness beyond the window. It was the middle of the night now. Her arm throbbed dully in its cast, and she carefully shifted, propping it on a pillow. The slight rustle woke Luca. He was at her side in an instant. "Emily, do you need something?" he asked softly, concern shadowing his handsome face. She managed a small smile. His tie and jacket were gone, the top buttons of his dress shirt undone. In the dim light he looked younger, a strand of dark hair falling over his forehead. "Water, maybe," she whispered. He helped her sit up and brought a glass to her lips. After she drank, he brushed a crumb of sleep from her cheek with surprising tenderness. "Better?" Emily nodded. Her mother was asleep in another guest room down the hall, safe and sound. "Luca, I can't thank you enough," she said, voice husky. "You saved my life. Twice today, actually." A muscle in his jaw tightened. "I'm just sorry I didn't stop him sooner," he said, a touch of anger, at himself, coloring his tone. This never should have happened to you." She reached out with her left hand and touched his forearm. "It's not your fault. You did more than anyone. I'll never forget it." His eyes met hers, and for a moment something unsaid crackled in the air between them. He cleared his throat, looking almost uncomfortable with the praise. To change the subject, he asked, "How's the pain?" "Manageable," she lied. The meds were wearing off and a dull ache had settled, but she didn't want to bother him. Luca saw through it, his brow furrowed. "Stay here. I'll get your medicine." He returned a minute later with a pill and a glass of milk from the kitchen. Emily obeyed, swallowing the painkiller. Awkward silence followed as he stood by the bed, seeming reluctant to leave her alone in the dark. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" The request slipped out before she could second-guess it. His eyes softened. Of course. Without hesitation, he took a seat on the edge of the bed. He kept a respectful distance, but his presence alone was immensely comforting. Emily sank back against the pillows. In the quiet, she studied Luca's face. Strong jaw, Roman nose, those intense dark eyes that had terrified Brett, yet somehow eased her fears. "Who are you, really?" she found herself asking in a drowsy whisper. "Everyone seems to listen to you. Even the police just let you take me home." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I have some influence in this city," he said carefully. "My family's been here a long time. Sometimes we help the police with issues, and they return the courtesy." It was an evasive answer, but Emily was too exhausted to pry. Some part of her already suspected Luca was no ordinary businessman. Ordinary men didn't have personal drivers and security guards, nor did their gazes promise violent retribution as his had when he saw her broken on the ground. Yet she felt no fear of him, quite the opposite. "Influence is good," she murmured. Her eyes drifted shut. "Maybe you can influence the pain in my arm to go away faster." Luca chuckled quietly. "Rest is the best medicine, I hear." He began to hum then, a low, soothing melody that rumbled through his chest. It might have been an old Italian lullaby. Emily didn't recognize it, but the gentle tune eased the last of her tension. Rain pattered softly against the window, and Luca's baritone murmur blended with the distant thunder in a lullaby of safety. In Luca's arms that night, Emily realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying her burdens alone. This formidable man, dangerous to others, yet so gentle with her, had stepped into her darkness like a beacon. As she finally let sleep pull her under, she breathed him in, feeling safe and strangely hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. Early the next morning, a retaliatory strike came. Brett and his newfound friends firebombed Marge's diner, hurling a Molotov cocktail through the front window before dawn. Thankfully, the diner was empty at that hour, but the beloved eatery went up in flames. Emily and her mother awoke to the phone ringing and the terrible news that the place she loved was now charred and smoldering. Emily was devastated. She sat at Luca's kitchen table in his penthouse, her cast cradled to her chest, watching through tears as a morning news report showed firefighters dousing the blackened shell of the diner. All she could think was, Charlie, her co-workers, how would they recover? Luca placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It can be repaired," he assured gently. "I'll make sure of it." Before Emily could even process that, worse news arrived, a panicked call from one of Luca's security men stationed outside her mother's apartment. Despite the precautions, Brett had struck again. Using the distraction of the fire, he'd slipped past the guard and abducted Marie when she stepped out to check their mail. Emily's blood ran cold as Luca relayed the message. Her mother was gone. A few minutes later, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her heart in her throat, she opened it to see a photo that made her scream. A picture of her mom tied to a chair, eyes red and terrified. Brett's message followed. "Come alone, or she dies." "No, no!" Emily gasped, leaping up. The sudden movement sent pain lancing through her broken arm. But she didn't care. Her mother's anguished face in that photo was all she could see. Brett had her. Because of me, Emily thought in horror. He was doing this to draw her out. Her breathing hitched into a sob. With her good hand, she fumbled for her coat. "He wants me. I have to go. I'll give him what he wants," she babbled, panic rising as she headed for the penthouse door. If sacrificing herself meant her mom would be freed, then so be it. "Absolutely not." Luca intercepted her halfway, his hands coming to grip her shoulders firmly. "That's exactly what he wants. You alone, vulnerable. I'm not going to let you walk into a trap." Emily trembled violently. But if I don't go, he'll hurt her. It's my mom, Luca. I can't just..." "We will get her back," Luca vowed, locking eyes with her. There was such ferocity in them, such certainty, that it halted her spiraling thoughts. He drew a breath, lowering his voice. Listen to me. Years ago, I lost someone I cared for to a man like Brett. I was too late to save her. I swore I'd never let that happen again. A shadow of old pain crossed his face before it hardened with resolve. I won't lose your mother, or you, but we do this my way, together, with a plan and backup. Trust me, Emily. Her vision blurred with tears. He was asking for her trust when her world was falling apart. But Luca had earned it a dozen times over. She clenched her eyes shut, then opened them and nodded shakily. Together, she whispered. Luca's contacts quickly traced Brett and the Morello crew, the small-time gang he'd aligned with, to an abandoned waterfront warehouse on the east side docks. Brett clearly thought he'd found protection with these thugs, protection from Luca's wrath. He couldn't have been more wrong. Without hesitation, Luca assembled a team of his men and prepared to move. Emily insisted on coming. She refused to cower on the sidelines while her mother was in danger. Luca acquiesced only after she promised to stay back unless needed, and after he outfitted her with a spare bulletproof vest that hung awkwardly over her sling but made him feel slightly less anxious. Thunderstorms rolled in as Luca's convoy of black SUVs approached the warehouse near dusk. As they positioned quietly around the rusted loading bay, a sudden crack of gunfire rang out. One of Luca's men stumbled back from the side door, blood blossoming on his shoulder. An enemy lookout had spotted them. Before Luca could react, Emily was already out of the SUV and rushing to the injured man's side. "Stay down!" she hissed, her broken arm screaming in protest as she knelt beside him. With her free hand, she pressed hard on the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. The man groaned, eyes wide with pain and surprise that this young woman was the one aiding him. Gunfire erupted around them, bullets pinging off metal shipping containers. Luca cursed and returned fire from behind a concrete pillar, torn between focusing on the enemy and watching Emily crouched in the open. "Emily, get back!" he shouted, fear sharpening his voice. "I've got him!" she shouted back. A bullet zinged off the ground 2 yards away, but she didn't flinch. Her training, both as a CNA and the crash first aid course she'd taken, kicked in fully. She tore a strip from the hem of her shirt with her teeth and good hand, tying it tightly above the bleeding wound as a tourniquet. "Go, Luca. I'll keep him alive. Go." Luca hesitated, heart pounding. In the glow of a nearby security light, he saw her, face set in determination despite the danger. She was tending to one of his like it was the only thing that mattered. Pride and fear warred in his chest. At last he jerked his head in a nod and signaled his men. They surged forward in a coordinated rush. 2 of Luca's guards laid down suppressing fire at the warehouse windows, while Luca himself slammed a boot into the side door, splintering the lock. A flash grenade was tossed in. Bright light and a concussive boom erupted inside. By the time Emily finished bandaging the wounded guard's shoulder and dragged him behind cover, the firefight was all but over. Inside the warehouse, it was chaos. Half blind and disoriented from the stun grenade, Brett's new allies offered only token resistance before being overwhelmed. In the dim, flickering light, Luca moved like a force of nature, disarming one thug with a swift strike, pistol-whipping another who lunged at him with a knife. The remaining gang members, realizing who they were up against, whispering Romano in terror, dropped their weapons and surrendered, scrambling to their knees. Emily crept up to the doorway, peering in cautiously while supporting the limping guard she'd helped. The vast space smelled of oil and desperation. Wooden crates were stacked in columns, and near the center, an empty chair and ropes indicated where her mother had been held. Now Marie cowered a few yards away, pushed against a post by one of the Morello thugs as a human shield, until Luca's men had incapacitated that thug, freeing her. "Mom," Emily cried, spotting her. Marie, though wrists chafed and face streaked with tears, was alive and visibly unharmed. At the sound of Emily's voice, she broke away from the post and ran into her daughter's good arm. They clung to each other tightly. "Oh, thank God. Emily," Marie sobbed. "I was so scared. He told me he'd—" "It's okay," Emily soothed, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I'm here. You're safe now. I've got you." Around them, Luca's men rounded up the subdued gang members, kicking their weapons out of reach and zip-tying wrists. A couple of Morello thugs nursed injuries, one with a bullet graze, another knocked unconscious in the melee. The air rang with the aftermath of violence, and at the center of it stood Luca and Brett. Brett was on his knees, blood trickling from a split lip and a swelling cut above his brow. Gone was the bravado. His eyes showed white around the edges. And panicked now that he finally comprehended the storm he'd brought upon himself. Luca loomed over him, gun in hand. The muzzle was mere inches from Brett's forehead. Emily gently released her mother and stepped forward on unsteady legs. She had imagined confronting Brett again so many times, usually with fear, sometimes with fury. But now, seeing him kneeling in the dirty warehouse, a pathetic heap of bluster and cowardice, she felt nothing. No. Not quite nothing. She felt finished, done with him owning a single inch of her soul. Brett's gaze flickered to her. Even now, a smirk tried to form on his swollen lips. "Look at you," he rasped. "Played hero and got your arm broke. Stupid girl. You think this fixes anything? I'll kill you for what you—" "Shut up, Brett," Emily said, voice surprisingly calm. She stepped into the light, clutching her sling. Everyone, Luca's men, the remaining thugs, fell silent, watching the battered young woman address her abuser. Emily's green eyes burned with a hard, clear light. "We're done. You have no power over me anymore. You're going to jail, or worse, and I will still be standing. You lost." Brett's face contorted in hate. He lunged a fraction toward her, spitting. "You bit!" Luca struck him across the jaw with his pistol. Not too hard. But enough to send Brett reeling back into the concrete floor. "Mind your tongue," Luca said softly. The deadly quiet of his tone sent a shiver down even Emily's spine, though she knew his anger wasn't aimed at her. "Remember where you are and who you're talking to." Brett coughed, dazed. He looked up at Luca with sullen animal fear. "Go on then," he snarled hoarsely, trying to save face in front of his defeated cronies. "Do it. Shoot me, you gangster coward. You don't have the guts." Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. For a terrifying instant, Emily thought he truly would. Certainly the abyss in Luca's eyes suggested a man who found the idea of snuffing Brett out extremely satisfying. But then Luca glanced at Emily. She was watching him, not with horror exactly, but with plea. She'd seen enough violence. She didn't want blood on his hands. She realized that keenly, not on her behalf. Exhaling slowly, Luca lowered the gun. "No," he said, almost to himself. "I think spending the rest of your life in a cell is far more fitting." Brett blinked, seemingly shocked that he wasn't about to die. Two of Luca's men hauled him up and began binding his wrists with brutal efficiency. Police sirens echoed in the distance, doubtless drawn by the warehouse gunfire reports. Luca gave curt instructions to his people. They would leave the beaten gangsters for the authorities, along with evidence of their crimes. He'd anonymously tipped the police to ensure swift arrival. None of Luca's own crew intended to be present when flashing lights showed up. Within minutes, the warehouse was cleared of Luca's men. They moved out like shadows, escorting Emily and Marie to the waiting SUVs. Brett and his cronies remained behind in the dusty darkness, bruised, bound, and delivered to justice on a silver platter. As the convoy sped away under the fading wail of approaching sirens, Emily sat in the back seat between her mother and Luca, shaking from adrenaline. It was over. Over. Brett was done. He'd face the law, and even if the law somehow failed, Emily knew Luca's ominous promise hung over him for life. Either way, he'd never bother her again. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. The pressure in her chest eased for the first time since Brett's shadow had fallen over her life. Beside her, Marie squeezed her hand, and on the other side, Luca gently draped a blanket over both their shoulders, pulling it snug. "It's over," he affirmed, as if reading her mind. His dark eyes met Emily's, exhaustion and relief mingling in them. "He can't hurt you anymore." Emily's throat tightened with a surge of emotion, relief, gratitude, and something deeper she dared not name just yet. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. She looked from her mother to Luca. "Thank you both for being with me through this." Marie kissed her temple. "Sweetheart, we wouldn't be anywhere else." Luca said nothing, but he reached over and entwined his fingers with Emily's, careful of her cast. In that simple gesture, she felt everything he couldn't put into words. "I'm here. You're safe. I care about you." She leaned her head on his shoulder as the city lights streaked by, bruised, battered, and bone-weary. Emily Porter had never felt so loved. That night, back at Luca's penthouse, Emily couldn't sleep. The adrenaline had long since drained, leaving aches and raw memories in its wake. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, gazing out at the city skyline. Her right arm rested heavy in its sling. Each throb was a reminder that she was alive, and that Brett hadn't won. "How are you feeling?" came Luca's voice behind her. She turned. He was watching her from the sofa, concern written plainly across his face. They had cleaned up. Marie was asleep again in the guest room, and Luca had finally changed out of his rain-sodden, blood-streaked clothes into a crisp navy dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. A faint purple bruise marked his jaw from the scuffle, and Emily realized she hadn't even thanked him properly for all he endured. Instead of answering his question, she crossed the room, sat down beside him, and carefully touched the bruise on his jaw. "Does this hurt?" she asked softly. Luca's eyebrows arched in surprise. "It's nothing," he assured, though he tilted his head obligingly at her gentle prodding. "I've had worse, trust me." Emily's eyes stung. The man had literally taken punches and possibly bullets for her. She recalled one of his men had been wounded, thankfully not gravely. And here he was, acting like it was all in a day's work. Maybe for him it is, she thought, marveling. "I remember you once said you have influence," she said quietly. "I'm starting to think that was an understatement." A wry smile curved his lips. Perhaps a bit. There was an intimate silence between them then. The storm had passed, leaving the night sky clear. In the soft glow of a lamp, Emily truly looked at Luca, this enigmatic, fearless man who had come roaring into her life. She remembered the first time she'd served him coffee months ago, how intimidating and aloof he'd seemed. Who would have imagined he'd be her guardian angel when she needed one most? He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "So, what's next for you, Miss Porter? Once your arm heals?" he asked, attempting lightness but unable to hide the genuine interest in his tone. Emily gave a half-smile. "Honestly, probably back to waitressing, helping Charlie rebuild the diner, trying to get life back to normal." Luca nodded thoughtfully. "You could do that, certainly, but you know," he added, his voice gentler, "there might be other options." She tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" He offered a tentative smile. "Remember when I first came to the diner with my bodyguard and he spilled hot coffee? You jumped into action so fast, made him dunk his hand in ice water before he even felt the burn. You were impressive." Emily blushed faintly. "It was just basic first aid, and I felt bad he got hurt on my shift." "You have a gift for helping people," Luca continued. "Even tonight, with one arm in a sling and bullets flying, you were saving someone's life. Not everyone would do that." He paused, and then drew a breath as if making a decision. "You once mentioned you dreamed of becoming an EMT, pursuing your certification." She blinked in surprise. "I did mention that. How do you remember?" "I remember everything you tell me," he said simply, "and I've been thinking, if you still want to, you should do it. The city needs people like you." He met her eyes earnestly. "If money or time off work is an obstacle, I'd like to help. I could arrange flexible hours for you somewhere, or cover the course fees outright. Whatever it takes." Emily's mouth fell open. Of all the things she expected him to say, offering to sponsor her education was not one of them. "Luca, I can't accept that," she stammered. "You've already done so much for me." His hand found hers on the couch. "Emily, this isn't charity. Consider it an investment in someone I believe in." A playful glint lit his eyes. "Besides, one day I might get myself into trouble and require a top-notch paramedic. Selfishly, I'd like that to be you." Despite herself, Emily laughed, a bright, genuine sound that had Luca's smile widening. "All right," she relented softly. "I'll think about it. It would be amazing, honestly. A dream." He lifted her hand and pressed it to his lips in a courtly gesture that sent her heart fluttering. "You deserve to live your dream," he said. Emotion clogged her throat. No one outside of her mother had ever shown such faith in her. It was overwhelming, in the best way. Luca seemed to sense her teetering on the edge of tears, and because he smoothly shifted topics, or rather, he finally addressed the one topic looming unspoken between them. "Emily," he began quietly, "about earlier, about everything, I need to tell you something." She held her breath. He rarely sounded this unsure. He continued, gaze dropping to their intertwined fingers. "My life is complicated. You probably realize by now I'm not exactly a simple businessman. I have enemies, like those men tonight. I deal with problems in unconventional ways. His voice grew hoarser. I was afraid that seeing that side of my life would make you want to run the other direction. Emily swallowed. If you're trying to tell me you're some kind of crime boss or something, she said gently. I pieced a bit of it together. At his slight look of surprise, she managed a tiny grin. I'm not blind. The way people defer to you, the resources you have, the family reputation you mentioned. I'd have to be stupid not to connect the dots. A tense silence. Then Luca let out a breath, half relief, half resignation. And, now that you know, do I terrify you? She cupped his hand between both of hers, one warm flesh, one encased in plaster. You saved me, she emphasized. Whatever line of work you're in, with me, you've been nothing but kind and protective and honest. I'm not afraid of you, Luca. Noting the unsteady rise of his chest, she added in a near whisper, in fact, I think I've never felt safer than I do when I'm with you. His eyes snapped up to meet hers. In them, she saw hope fighting with disbelief. He raised a hand toward her face, then paused. May I? He asked softly. Heart fluttering, Emily nodded. His palm cradled her cheek, rough calluses brushing her skin. The warmth of it sent tingles through her. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that, he murmured. Then Luca Romano, the stoic, composed Mafia Don feared by so many, actually blushed. I've been alone a long time, Emily. I didn't realize how empty I was until you stumbled into my life. You've changed everything, he gave a shaky little laugh. Saving you, protecting you, it's given me more purpose than all the family business ever has. Tears slipped free from Emily's eyes, rolling down to